In recovery from infidelity, some people call it trickle truthing, some people call it drip feeding. The reality is drip feeding is when you give your spouse or your partner information about your infidelity. They will ask, "Is that everything?" And you say yes, only to come back a day, a week, a month later with more information or new information. We call that drip feeding because you're drip feeding them a little bit of detail, a little bit of detail, a little bit of detail. And typically, it is so much detail over a prolonged period of time that the chances of recovery for that couple are smaller and smaller due to the fact that the unfaithful spouse continues to drop new nuclear bombs upon the betrayed spouse, and it causes so much upheaval, sometimes a couple just doesn't make it. A couple of days ago, I was talking to a gentleman, and he was really frustrated and said, "Samuel, it's been about a year. I mean, when are we going to really gain some momentum and really kind of move forward?" And I said, "Well, hold on there, big shooter. Let me remind you, you only got to full disclosure, like really full disclosure, about 2 months ago, right?" And he said, regrettably, "Yes." I said, "I'm not trying to shame you, but I just want to remind you it's really only been 2 months. And I want to help all of you understand that full disclosure is what really starts the healing clock, if you will. So anytime there's new information, the clock starts over." So I can understand that so many of you get frustrated, especially unfaithful spouses, because you say, "Well, it's been 2 years or 3 years or 5 years," and you really have to look back and go, wait a minute. When was absolute full disclosure of what's going on? Because that's when the clock really, truly started. Really, one of the worst things that you can do to your betrayed spouse, on top of obviously infidelity, and besides relapse, if you will, is drip feeding. Because drip feeding continues to exacerbate the pain and the hurt and the torment that the betrayed spouse has to wrestle with. So I want to give you a few things that drip feeding does to the betrayed spouse, not in an effort to shame you or kind of, turn the knife inside of you, unfaithful spouse. But remember, we are on the topic of creating safety for your spouse. And if you continue to drip feed, you're not safe for your spouse. You're not safe for your recovery process. But I really want to help you understand what drip feeding does so that you can maybe put into some words and some verbiage to your betrayed spouse and try and repair the damage that your drip feeding has done. I also want to just appeal to some of you that may be finding this video blog and you're about to disclose, or maybe you've disclosed once or twice and you're really wrestling with new information. I really want to help you understand this is what drip feeding will do to your spouse if you utilize it in a dysfunctional recovery. When you drip feed your spouse is constantly in panic mode. They're always waiting for the next bomb to drop. They can't really get any footing underneath them, and so they constantly are worried that there's new information, which makes it very hard to trust, very hard to be vulnerable, very hard to connect because they're always in fear of what is coming next. Drip feeding will also really steal from the betrayed spouse any level of, I call it, calm or peace, because they can't let their guard down with you. They're worried that, like last time, they let their guard down, they tried to build a little bit and connect a little bit with you, and then new information came, and then they not only despised you, but they despised themselves for letting their guard down, because they constantly hear these voices that say, "Don't trust her, don't trust him, don't believe what they're saying, it's just another lie." And so they're constantly wrestling with these voices, and then they get vulnerable, let their guard down, and then you have to come back a day, a couple of days, a month later and disclose new information. Now they despise themselves, they don't have any sense of peace, because if you've done it once, who's to say you won't do it 5 more times? As I alluded to, the clock starts over. So when they get new information, they've got to grieve it, process it, work through it, understand that they're going to have to eventually forgive it and live with it. So they start to wrap their mind around it, and then they get new information. Now the clock starts all over again. And so there's a sense of exhaustion and utter just contempt for the process, not just you, but for the process that they have to start all over again, especially if it's been a few months or even a year, because now everything that they did seems lost and disintegrates in their hands. It really doesn't, because that was still work that they had to do in their heart and in their soul. But to them, in a very real way, I want to validate, now it starts all over again. What you've done is you've ripped away any and all momentum from not only your recovery process, but from your betrayed spouse. It also instills this inherent cynicism in the heart of the betrayed, which I have found incredibly difficult to repair. And I will tell you, some of the most gracious people who have decided to live with their unfaithful spouse's actions struggle with the cynicism, not just in recovery and towards their unfaithful spouse, but in life. And it's this inherent, oh, here we go again, or this inherent, well, how do I know that this is not going to be like last time, right? There's this cynicism that is not just due to life, but when you've been burned and then you've been burned multiple times, you understand the inherent challenge to believe you, the unfaithful spouse, and to them, you're an unsafe person. So why would they keep subjecting themselves to being hurt time and time again? Finally, drip feeding further wounds the betrayed spouse, and it continues to reinforce that you are not safe. And eventually, any good therapist or any good third party who's an expert is going to say that eventually you're going to have to, as a betrayed spouse, remove yourself out of that situation because you keep getting hurt time and time again. Why would we keep running back to the situation that keeps hurting us? Drip feeding is toxic because it absolutely takes any and all power from the betrayed spouse to be able to reconnect and find reconnection and restoration with the spouse, because the spouse keeps hurting them, keeps dropping new information, steals from them momentum, and really makes the process impossible to generate long-term and short-term momentum. You have every opportunity to be safe for your spouse. Safety will come when you choose to do disclosure with an expert third party to get all of the information out in a controlled, safe environment so that both of you can finally start to heal.